Tonight's forum features 3 candidates for Missoula City Council from Wards 1 and 2. All 3 are currently serving you on the council. Brian von Lossberg is running unopposed in Ward 1 for his second 4-year term. Jordan Hess is running unopposed for his second 4-year term in Ward 2. And Ruth Ann Swaney is running unopposed for a 2-year term in Ward 2. I'd like to thank our candidates for participating in tonight's forum. I'd also like to thank Jane Kelly, Neighborhood Coordinator for Missoula's Neighborhood Councils, for organizing this event. And I'd like to thank my fellow League of Women Voters volunteer, Kelly Finn, for helping this evening. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization. We never support candidates or political parties. For nearly 100 years, the League has promoted unbiased voter education through forums such as tonight. But most of all, I would like to thank you, the voters, for tuning in and turning out for this election. You make democracy work. This evening, you will have the opportunity to ask our candidates questions. Kelly has note cards and pens for you to write down your questions. They will be screened for duplication. All 3 candidates will answer each question. The candidates will have 1 minute to respond, and they will be timed. But first, we'll begin with 2-minute opening statements from our candidates. And we'll begin with Brian von Lossberg from Ward 1. And you can have this and see if you can make it work.
I'm actually going to try and do without it, if that's okay. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
So first of all, thanks also. I want to repeat the thanks to Jane and Karen from the Office of Neighborhoods, to Nancy from the League of Women Voters, and you all for coming out. It's a really beautiful evening outside, so thank you for spending it inside with us. As Nancy said, my name is Brian von Lossberg, running for re-election in Ward 1. I'm proud to represent Ward 1 represents the Rattlesnake area, upper and lower, the north side where I happen to live, and the majority of the downtown area, as well as some of the area out toward East Missoula with some of those newer homes in the golf course area. I have a lovely wife and 5-year-old child. My wife, Genevieve, you may have encountered if you've ever interacted with Garden City Harvest. She's the director of outreach there. And we have a 5-year-old daughter who just started kindergarten at Mole Elementary, and we're very excited about that. I'm excited to be running for re-election. In a nutshell, I think what I can bring in the second term to the council is experience from the first term, dedication, and results. I've carried legislation, resolutions, etc. I've been very active in all sorts of activities on council. I've been very proud to chair the Parks and Rec Committee for almost the entire time during my term, and look forward to serving in any additional capacity on council. I take the direction that we get from the charter very seriously, and the city charter, if you haven't gone through it, is a good document to go through, and it talks about council's legislative policymaking responsibilities and focus on people's health, welfare, and security, and that's what I use as my guiding principles on council. So thanks very much.
Next, Jordan Hess from Ward 2.
Well, thank you very much. I'd like to repeat the thanks to Nancy and Kelly from the League of Women Voters, and to Jane and Karen from the opposite neighborhoods. I think that the neighborhood council structure, and most of you were here for the neighborhood council meeting a few minutes ago, is one of the most positive aspects of Missoula city government. It's a great way to get people involved and to communicate ideas to the city council, and from the council to the neighborhood, and to foster involvement and foster community and sense of neighborhood pride. So I'm glad to be here at this event, and I'm grateful to Jane and Karen for all the work that they do to run that system. I represent currently Ward 2. I'm just closing out my first term, and I'm seeking your support for a second term. Ward 2 is a very strange ward geographically and demographically. It is kind of everything west of the Missoula Fresh Market on Broadway. So it includes the west side, the historic west side, the Grand Creek area, and then Pleasant View, 44 Ranch, and areas west. And so I think one of the things that I've learned over the last 2 years is that there is an incredible, it's incumbent on a successful city council member to really listen and focus on problem solving. And we have problems thrown at us on a day-to-day basis that don't necessarily have simple solutions. I've learned a ton over the last few years, and I would really look forward to continuing to serve. The last couple of years I've chaired the Public Works Committee and the Transportation Policy Coordinating Committee, and those have been really great opportunities to influence our infrastructure, and I would look forward to your support moving forward.
Thank you. And now, Ruth Ann Swaney. 2 minutes.
Oh, okay. Watching the time. Yes. Thank you. I am Ruth Ann Swaney, and I'm also currently representing Ward 2. I began serving in January, so much less time than either Brian or Jordan, and that's part of how I learned about the neighborhood councils, and so I also just wanted to extend my appreciation to Jane and then to Karen also. Karen, we began working about the same time, and then thank our moderator today for bringing us all together. And serving on council has been, I've done a lot of learning, but I feel like part of why I chose to serve was hopefully to be able to bring forward voices that weren't always included in some of our city discussions. And I've been here in Missoula for the past 10 years with my family. We have 3 children, so 2 of them are still in school. We have 1 boy in Big Sky High School, and then our daughter just started kindergarten here in Hellgate. So she's not in this building, but she's in one of the buildings just on the other side. So we've seen some of the changes that have occurred over the past 10 years here in Missoula, and it's exciting to be part of helping to create and to some extent carry out the vision of what our community can look like or what we would like it to look like. So just thank you for coming this evening, and I know Mr. Moore is one of our regular people who come to our city council, and so I think that's an important part of this whole process, so thank you.
Okay, thank you. Again, Kelly has note cards if you'd like to ask a question. We ask that you write it down, and then she'll bring them up to me. So we'll go on to our first question, and the order of the response will be the same for each question. We'll start with you, Brian, and then go to Jordan and Ruth Ann. So our first question is the budget, as I'm sure you're concerned with. And this is a several-part question. You have 1 minute to respond. First part is, how much did the budget increase for 2018 and for 2017 over 2016? What were the reasons for the 2018 increase? What changes do you expect for 2019? And does the Missoula Redevelopment Association or agency impact the cost of city operations, the MRA? So, how much did it increase? What were the reasons? Do you expect changes for 2019 and the impact of the MRA?
Sure, I need additional reference to it, and I probably won't get all of those in a minute. The biggest change from the budget that we just approved to the budget the year before that isn't associated with things like union negotiated increases and such is the fact that the water utility is actually part of the city operations now. And there are multiple entities, and we call them enterprise funds, that exist within the city. The 2 best examples, or 3 quick examples, the water utilities one, sewer operations, and already seeing the 30-second sign, and aquatics. And those enterprise funds are important because revenues and expenses can carry over year to year.
Changes for 2019?
We haven't begun the budget process for 2019 yet, so I'd be speculating at this point. And MRA is another contributing entity within the city.
Okay, and you can also, you'll have 3-minute closing statements, so if you want to add anything during your closing statements, because you only have a minute for this, it is kind of tight. So Jordan?
Thanks. So I think I'll reiterate that the budget increased fairly substantially as a result of acquiring the water system. However, the revenues associated with that budget increased as well. So the water system is, as Brian mentioned, an enterprise fund where water revenues service the debt on that purchase. They fund acquisitions, or excuse me, they fund improvements to the water system, main replacements, leak reduction, etc. And so while the expenditures associated with that are now in the budget, so are the revenues from the water bills. So that's a really important distinction. I'm going to touch briefly on the Missoula Redevelopment Agency. And I think it's really important to note that this is tax increment financing. So funding is frozen at a period in time, and then any additional tax revenues are applied to make improvements within that district. That is what I like to call but-for money. But for that money, development would not happen.
Wow, that's fast.
Go ahead, Ruth Ann.
Okay. So both of my colleagues touched on some of the reasons for the increase regarding the acquisition of the water, and that was something I came in on the tail end of, but I believe that was a very important decision to actually pursue the acquisition of our water system. And as far as it was a tough budget season. It was my first one, and learning how the process goes. And it was hard seeing how things ended up needing to increase. And I'm hoping that that's not something that is perpetual. I'm hoping that we can see things more stable as far as next year's budget and not continual increases. Let's see. How much the reasons 2019 and MRA. Oops, sorry.
Again, if you have anything to add, you can include it in the closing comments. Okay, our next question. What city project that is current or upcoming are you most invested in?
Okay. I'm not sure it is the one I am most invested in, but it's an important project for the entire community, especially downtown, and that's what the work that's going on and the planning that's going on at the Fox Triangle site. Riverfront Triangle is often how people think of it as well. I and another 2 council members have been involved in the development team negotiations, working on that. You've probably seen coverage. There have been sporadic updates over time involving the plans for the conference center, hotel, ground floor retail. There's a lot of expectation about medical office building there. So that one of the principal things I've been concerned on in those negotiations has been making sure that the city's getting fair value for the land as part of the deal. It's a very complicated deal. We'll actually be seeing it again here in council in November. That's a big project for the community.
Mr. Hess?
Okay, thanks. This is a project that is, or a series of projects, I guess, that are really dear to me, is our wastewater treatment facility, which is relatively proximate to where we are, down off of Mullen Road. And we have a really innovative series of projects going on at the wastewater treatment plant. We are working on a methane capture and electricity cogeneration project. So the plant will actually generate a lot of its own electricity and heat from methane produced as a byproduct of running a wastewater treatment plant. That's on top of we're a couple of years into the Poplar Tree Farm project down there. And that tree farm diverts water that would treated effluent that would otherwise be discharged into the river. And we're diverting several million gallons of that on an ongoing basis. And also then the associated acquisition of the compost facility, where we're able to provide a lot of our own compost for parks and other facilities.
And Ruth Ann, what are you most invested in?
So I thought, was it invested or excited? Or can you both? Okay. Okay, so I thought, yeah, the Fox Triangle, that's a big project and that's exciting. Part of what's exciting about it to me is the proximity to our river. And then Jordan, so I was thinking about all the things that the parks is doing in regards to our river. And then Jordan talked about our wastewater treatment, and that's exciting. But I think too, those are important projects that are coming forward and that we've been discussing multiple times. But I'm really excited about, we briefly talked about the park, the playground. So I'm sure some of you have already discussed the park, because what's exciting to me about that is it started in the community, in that neighborhood, and to see how fast things developed directly out of the neighborhood council working together. And we've been able to contribute a little bit to that, but I think that that's an exciting project here in Missoula.
Thank you. Well, we got a couple of traffic questions. One is specific to the Flynn Lane and the speed close to the school here, and the other is a little more general. Which traffic problem in your ward irritates you most? And do you recommend a solution?
All right. In Ward 1, one of the areas that I get the most constituent feedback on is the Broadway-Van Buren interchange. And for any folks who come down the Rattlesnake and want to cross that intersection and either continue on, whether it's turning left or right, maybe heading out to Missoula College or going into downtown or heading across the university, it's a difficult intersection. There are going to be 2 roundabouts that are going to be going in there, sort of a figure 8. And I've worked with, Jordan has helped out, and Montana Department of Transportation, specifically trying to make that intersection safer for bikers and pedestrians who cross it. We're actually going to be seeing the implementation of a leading pedestrian interval where there'll be a little bit of time for people to start get out in the crosswalk and such before people get through the open turn. And we'll see how that goes. And obviously we're watching closely what happens with the roundabouts, but that's my focus area, that interchange.
I think the answer to Flynn Lane is we really need to honor the planning efforts that went in the early stages of planning the Pleasant View subdivision. And that is, the ultimate plans to connect Mary Jane Boulevard, which, Flynn Lane was never designed to be a collector road carrying the traffic level that it's carrying now. And it's adjacent to a school, and it has no curbs and gutters, and it's just not built for what it's used as now. That said, when ultimately Mary Jane Boulevard is connected, it needs to be done in a way that's safe and slow and honors the neighborhood's desires. I think the England traffic calming measures will help with that a lot. I'd be a lunatic if I didn't say that like everyone else in Ward 2, that the biggest traffic problem in Ward 2 is Reserve Street. And there's an expression that building more and bigger roadways to ease congestion is like fighting obesity by loosening the belt. And I'll return to that another time.
And Ruth Ann, traffic.
Okay, so one of the things that I think about when I think about Flynn Lane is specifically with my children, so bringing them to school and then trying to get over to campus. And for me, that time of day, it's really tough trying to get onto Mullen. And so would that be an example of a place where a roundabout might be useful? And then when I think about traffic, I agree that Reserve is a monster, and we definitely try to time when we travel on Reserve. But I also think about coming down from Grant Creek, and I think about how there's one way in and one way out, and that's, for me, thinking about some of the recent weather and things we've seen with hurricanes. We don't have hurricanes, but think our wildfires. that's a practical concern with Grant Creek, and then there was one other place, but I don't recall where.
Perfect, thank you. All right, this is an individual's question. I'm currently a permanent resident and not a U.S. citizen. With my current status, I'm unable to vote in city elections. Do you think U.S. citizenship should continue to be required to vote on the city level, and why?
That's a good question, and I have not formulated a particularly thoughtful response to that. I think citizenship is important, but we've been having a sort of great national debate about immigration, and I was supportive of the refugee resolution that we had before council.
You need to speak up.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, I was in my more thinking mode. I'd be, things that I don't know a lot about, which are many, I'd be interested in hearing the pros and cons on it. So.
Brian, my colleague here, always articulates that very well. Where I don't feel vested in it, or that this has been something that I've confronted before. It's a really interesting question. I think that first and foremost, it is incredibly important that we create a welcoming community where all feel respected and able to participate. Voting is a very fundamental question. It's not a local issue as far as the answer to the question, but I would be very interested in exploring it more and learning more.
Ruth Ann.
I like that question. That one, to me, I hadn't even thought about that. And personally, I would be supportive of that. And part of that is because when my grandmother was born, American Indians were still not U.S. citizens. And you look at what did they contribute to our country. And I think about people who aren't citizens, they do contribute to our community. And so that is something that I think, of course, I can't make that happen, but I think that is a very worthwhile conversation for us to have, and something I personally would want to support.
Thank you. Very thoughtful. On future development, do you favor infill or another growth pattern?
I'm supportive of what we adopted in our growth policy. It's a phenomenal and very inclusive outreach and participation process around formulating that growth policy. The growth policy very clearly focuses inward, to use the language. I'm supportive of that. I'm also cognizant that it creates challenges, and but I think this is a community that rises up to meet those kind of challenges, but I'm supportive of the policy.
Yeah, I'm absolutely supportive of infill. There are opportunities and times when it's appropriate to have greenfield development. 44 Ranch is an example of a subdivision that is planned and platted out, and just as Pleasant View was. And there's a place for that type of development. It's really appropriate at times. It's also incredibly appropriate to plan for infill in areas that are not particularly dense or very low density, or areas that are underdeveloped. I know there's a great effort surrounding building more housing in the area around the mall. And you look at that from an aerial photo or something, or even just driving through the area, and there is so much vacant land that is completely underutilized. So I think the more that we can focus inward, but while maintaining the character of our community, the better off we'll ultimately be.
Thank you. And Ruth Ann, infill?
Or what was the?
Or another growth pattern?
Okay, infill or another growth pattern. I would prefer infill just because I feel like we have some of the edges of our community are such beautiful pieces of land that I would feel bad about us developing in a different way. And I think about Enfield, but I want to make sure that, in my mind, when this happens, I don't want us to do things in a way that makes Missoula a place where we can't all afford to live. So I think that's an important consideration as we continue to have projects and develop.
Okay, thank you. Earthquakes, forest fires, coal spills, chemical spills are all in the headlines lately. What particular disasters are you most concerned about in your ward? And what more can city government do to prepare for disasters?
So the two that I'm most sort of aware and cognizant of, I live a few blocks from the train tracks, raising family there, friends and family that I love there. Coal traffic and derailments in that area, we've had some, especially tankers carrying volatile equipment. I know I've had multiple conversations over the years with the fire department, and I'm very grateful that they send a group of their folks off to special training. I believe it's going to in Colorado on how to fight those kind of special tanker fuel fires. The other one I would mention is forest fires, obviously. We just recently, the Forest Service did substantial thinning up in the Rattlesnake area. You've got a community of folks up there who, and a whole community in Missoula that recreates in that area, but a choke point when it comes to, potential issues of evacuation and such. So forest fire, train traffic and train derailments, two particular areas.
I'm not doubting you, but I live just across the railroad tracks from Brian, and I've been pretty involved in the railroad issues surrounding the railroad in my time on council. We passed a resolution some time ago that was instrumental or part of the picture in denying the Tongue River Railroad. And the thought process there is that there are down-rail impacts of coal mining that you create air quality impacts in down-rail communities, create traffic delays. And so I'm very interested in participating in federal rulemaking processes to make the tanker cars more safe. I think that's something that is not front of mind because there are relatively few rail disasters, but the ones that occur are terrible. The other piece is, and I'm out of time here, but fire in Grant Creek, egress there's one path in, one path out.
Thank you. And Ruth Ann?
So I don't live as closely to the railroad tracks, but I definitely live closer to Grant Creek, and I think about the forest fires, especially after the fires we've had this year and the impact of the smoke. And then, like we've said already, being able to get in and out of there. So I think about those natural disasters, but also one of the things that came to mind, and it's not necessarily a natural disaster, but we've also in the news seen an increase in, I don't know if I'd say social disasters, but some definite social conflicts. And I think about that, and I think about there's in our ward some pretty big disparities between in our community. And I think about in the wintertime, we have a number of homeless people that are in our ward. And so those are also things I think about, I guess I relate to when I think about disasters and hardships.
Thank you. Well, sort of back to the budget here. How do you feel about the increased tax burden due to the recent bond?
So I'm not sure. So we've had a number of bond issues recently. We've had the library bond, the Fort Missoula Regional Park bond, and the school bond, big ones. Did I mention library? I think hopefully I did. I supported those activities, each for different reasons, and I did so understanding what the impact would be on me as a homeowner, my wife and I as two people working and paying property taxes with a home. And I considered each one of those and felt in Fort Missoula Regional Park case, I actually principally supported that because of the economic development I think that will bring to that area of town and the entire community. Schools, I think, are the most important investment the community can make, and a library was somewhat associated with that. I am cognizant of the challenges that presents to people, but that's, I think, part of the great thing of having those voted on by the entire county. It's democracy.
Yeah, I'm very supportive of putting those large bond issues out. Well, I mean, it's a requirement, but putting those out to the voters is a critical way to engage support. And what we've seen time and time again is that our community wants these services. We want better schools. We want a better library. We want expanded mountain wine service. So all of those recent ballot issues I personally supported and voted for, but as my colleague said, I'm glad that those were put out to the public. I do think that we need to look forward to other revenue sources, diversifying our revenue sources so that we're not so dependent on property taxes. Something that communities like Whitefish and West Yellowstone have the opportunity to do through state law. We don't. And so working with the legislature to diversify revenue sources available to Missoula will be important in the future.
Thank you. And Ruth Ann.
I think we've definitely heard from, that's probably one of the biggest things that I think I heard from community members was the impact personally for people having their property taxes increase and how that was really a big concern if they were going to be able to stay in the community. And I'm hopeful, I'm really hopeful, like we have the gas tax, you know, maybe there's the resort tax potentially, and a way, like they're saying, of generating revenue is, would we be able to do something like a sweetened drink tax? So in one community, they taxed all soda, energy drinks with a tax, and then that was one way for the community to generate revenue aside from property tax. So maybe that's another possibility we could look into.
Thank you. I have 3 questions here that go to your role as a city council member, and we'll take each one separately because they're a little bit different, but they all go to that role. What is the most important role that you as a city council member have?
I would go back to what I mentioned in my opening statement and the direction I take from the charter. The city council is the policymaking body as established by the charter and created by the people. And then there's the specific language in there that I referenced about the health, welfare, and security of the people. And so we have 3 branches of government, local government, like mirrored elsewhere, and city council is the legislative policymaking body.
Jordan? Most important role.
Okay. I think our government institutions succeed when people participate and are informed and have a voice. And I think that that's what's broken in some of our other skills of politics right now. Locally, we have the pleasure and the responsibility and the ability to serve with a community that's very active. And you know, you might be on a quick trip to the grocery store that isn't very quick because someone stops you and asks about an issue, and that is I think in that way local government is the highest form of government. You know, fostering community involvement. So I think listening and being fair and being present in the community is the most important role.
Thank you. And Ruth Ann, the most important role.
I don't want to like totally just copy your answer, but I do believe that it's listening to what our community is saying to us, our needs. So how can we address those needs within our capacity, but then also weighing that with Sometimes we hear multiple people from our own wards that have differing opinions, and we need to make sure that whatever way we can, that their voice and their opinions are heard. And sometimes that's easy to do, and sometimes it's connecting them up with other people and city staff. And so, but sometimes that's a lot more challenging. So I think trying to listen, but also be a voice.
That actually segues very well into the next question about your role. What aspect of your job has been the most challenging?
I always get to go first, huh?
Yes, Paul?
I'm going to start by saying I whiffed on the previous one, and listening and representing my constituent values is the most important part. Sorry for the dry response.
Most challenging.
Most challenging is in a city of very engaged constituents, people with strong opinions and strong values, is listening to all of those, really listening and hearing people where they are, and then finding a way to represent those values in the policymaking work that we do.
Okay, thank you. Jordan, what's the most challenging aspect?
I think prioritizing. There are so many priorities, and they're not necessarily even competing. It's just people want more. People want more. People appreciate our parks and our trails and our streets that are not in great condition. And I mean, there's so many things that we need to do and so many things that we want to do. And striking a balance on doing the things that are important, to maintain the safety of our community, to maintain the livability of our community, and to enhance our community. And striking the right priority balance is really challenging. I think I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thank you. And Ruth Ann, what's been the most challenging part of the job for you?
Learning. So like I mentioned, I haven't been serving quite as long as my colleagues here at the table. So I've been learning as much as I can, as fast as I can, and I feel like one of the things that I'm still learning and trying to learn is how to engage better with the community and the people within my ward. And so how can I bring forward those voices if I'm not hearing them, if I'm not in the places where I need to be. So trying to learn has been one of my biggest challenges.
Okay, thank you. And the last one about your role, is there any vote you have taken on the council that you struggled with? And
God.
why?
Has there been any vote I've taken on the council that I haven't struggled with? There have been several votes that I've struggled with, and one that comes to mind, frankly, was the Merck vote. And I spoke about that in my comments when I was explaining my vote. And I think we have a responsibility when we're making our vote to put some context around it for our constituents. I felt that we reached the decision that was the right decision under the law that we had and the ordinance that we had. My heart was a little bit broken by it, and that was a challenge for me. I think that we're in a period of profound, and I'll probably come back to this in closing, we're in a period of profound change within the community and development. And I hear a lot of people in my ward in particular express fear in one way or another about losing that historic character through sort of a thousand cuts and slices.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I have had a number of votes that have gone back and forth, and I ultimately made a decision that was, it's never as black and white as it seems like it is the main thing I've learned through council service. There is so much gray area and so many issues. Land use decisions in particular are a great example of that all around. Brian mentioned the Merck. We've had a number of votes that are, maybe community sentiment is and public comment is not in line with what we're allowed to do under state law. A good example of that was Costco. The Costco locating at the end of Flynn Lane, which ultimately Costco decided to shelve that plan voluntarily, but the council was in a position of having to honor really state land use law and approve a project that was not necessarily very popular in the neighborhood.
Thank you. And Ruth Ann, what have you struggled with?
The vote that I struggled the most with, and I still think about today, is when we approved the Fox Triangle agreement. That was a really hard vote for me. Part of it was, it felt like a very big vote, and there was a lot of public comment. And some of the people who commented, I really respect, and it was hard to vote against their wishes. And it was in my understanding that this was just one piece of all of the agreements that need to happen. And so that was what gave me the comfort with my vote, although that was definitely the hardest vote that I made.
Thank you. What specific economic development projects would you most like to see in your ward and why?
A specific economic development project that is not just in my ward, but may get started within the downtown, gets back to community broadband, open access broadband. This is something the council wrestled with quite a bit in its economic development subcommittee for a while, and it has been largely sort of stalled. There is an effort going on in Bozeman, but when it comes right down to it, Missoula is the size of a city such that we don't enjoy the speed, the reliability, and the price points for broadband access that we probably should be able to if there was true competition in that marketplace. And if we were able to either foster or somehow partner in a way that we had open access broadband, I think we would see improvements in those areas: access, speed, reliability, price.
Thank you.
I spent the day at a master planning session for a new technology campus at Blackfoot Telecommunications and DJ&A. That's located right kind of behind Black Cat Bakery in between Broadway and Russell. And there's 35 acres there that are sort of a blank slate when it comes to what occurs there. Blackfoot and DJ&A engineers own most of that area. And there's a substantial Montana Department of Transportation holding there too. And so we have the opportunity for a privately led technology campus that's sort of an incubator for high-tech companies to locate and co-locate and work together. And the idea is changing quickly, but it's very exciting to me to have the opportunity to attract and retain high-paying tech jobs in a central campus right in our ward.
Thank you. And Ruth Ann, economic development projects for your ward.
Man, they think big scale. And here I am, I'm thinking, one thing that I love about Missoula and that I would love to see more of in our ward is local food. So more of us being able to grow and sell our food and I love Tia's tamales. So it's an example of taking local food and then making some really delicious food that you serve. And so that's what I think about. But then I think about, we have, what is it, city gardens, the cities that...
City gardens.
No. Where different cities where they have gardens that people can just eat from.
Co-ops. Co-op?
No, not co-ops, but
Community.
maybe, but it's we can't. I think how can we do something like that with our bears? So we're sort of limited. We're not as urban as other places, so we have to take that into consideration.
So what do you feel is the biggest issue in your ward, and what is your approach to this issue?
Jordan spoke eloquently about the value of the neighborhood councils, and he's right on the mark about those. It's a great activity, entity, intersection with council, way to amplify the voices of the constituents. I have not been to a neighborhood council meeting in the Rattlesnake where the top item was an urban deer. So I think there's just points I get for mentioning urban deer. It's a concern in the Rattlesnake. We had a meeting about this in public safety and health. There are a number of other issues that I could bring up, but that one I partly mentioned because this is a consistent issue that the neighborhood councils have raised, and there isn't a lot of other interest, frankly, from other council members and wards in tackling this, and so I volunteered to kind of pick this up and see where we might get. There's no money, there's no plan at this point, but we're going to see where we can put together a working group and where we might get.
Thank you.
I think the biggest issue in Ward 2 is really a citywide issue, and right now, to me, that is the issue of housing affordability or housing attainability, I should say, too. And I think that over the next several years, last year the mayor formed a specific office of housing to begin to, or to continue to address housing issues. And I think in the next couple of years we really need to adopt a comprehensive housing policy that looks at, supporting infill, supporting, a big piece of it is wage growth, directing our infrastructure funding to places, to strategically within the community so that those decisions support housing affordability, and also directing our tax increment financing funding to help support housing affordability. It's a big question, but I think it's a citywide issue.
It's interesting to me in our ward, I think there's a diversity of issues. So what's a big issue in one part of our ward is not even on the radar for the other part of our ward. So to say which one is the biggest, I would agree that affordable housing is something that would probably cover all of our ward. But I also think about there's certain parts of our ward where I feel like safety is an issue. So whether that's lighting, whether that's sidewalks, whether that's drug use, but drug activity. So I think housing would be across the ward, but I think most about basic safety is an issue that is how do we address making sure that all the people in our community feel safe. So part of that sidewalks, part of that lighting.
And we are to our last question. The neighborhood councils have coordinated this event. What do you think is the most valuable aspect of the neighborhood councils?
Selfishly for me, I've been to every neighborhood council meeting for Ward 1 since I started on council, and there's great presentations at them, but I'm very, very appreciative of the Q&A sessions with council members. It's extremely valuable for me. I know it's been for my colleague, Jason Weiner, when he was on, and Heidi West, who's my current colleague. Those opportunities to hear from people directly and have some extended conversations and get input, and sometimes it spills over after the meeting. I'm just deeply appreciative of those particular parts of the council meetings, the neighborhood council meetings.
I think,
What do you think is the most valuable aspect of the neighborhood councils?
wow. There's many. Probably one of the most valuable aspects is fostering a sense of community, and I can't even tell you how many neighborhood council meetings I've been to where people meet their neighbors. They didn't know one another, and it creates a strong community and a strong sense of belonging in a neighborhood. I'm really proud of 44 Ranch with the efforts surrounding the playground. That is, for folks who aren't aware, Liana and several people in the neighborhood have come together to attempt to get a playground built in 44 Ranch Park, and they've raised a bunch of money, and they've engaged the city at a variety of levels, and they've made a lot of connections with each other throughout that process. And that's a perfect example of neighborhood development.
And Ruth Ann, what do you think is most valuable about the neighborhood councils?
I think the neighborhood councils provide an opportunity for community members to be engaged in some ways with our city government, and it's kind of on their own terms. So it's not necessarily directly influenced by what's going on in our city council meetings. So that's an opportunity for community members, in each of the neighborhoods to tackle specific problems that are just relevant to their neighborhood. And so having a little bit of that autonomy as well as the capacity to take on some of those projects, I think that's valuable to have that scale of community action.
Thank you. Well, thank you, candidates, for your responses to the questions. We'll now move to the last part of this morning, and we'll have 3-minute closing comments from each of you. And again, we'll begin with you.
Sure. First of all, again, thank you. Thanks everyone for being here and for the thoughtful questions. I'm now thinking through all of the answers I'd like to change that I gave before, but let me use it as an opportunity in a positive way to say it's been such a pleasure to work with Jordan, other colleagues, and with Ruth for the time she's been on. I have been reflecting during the whole time here about her comment relative to the question about citizenship and voting and Native Americans not having the ability, citizens and voting right. And it's, she brings an incredible perspective to council that I'm deeply appreciative of on any number of issues. And I wanted to recognize that and say that, part of being an effective council member is building relationships and listening to your colleagues on council, those you often agree with and those you rarely agree with. And that's been a pleasure for me, and I'm looking forward to another opportunity to do that for another term. There's a few random things I was making notes about that I just want to touch on. I was overly literal when I was thinking about the neighborhood councils, and I was thinking about the actual meetings. And really the thing about the neighborhood councils is they provide that opportunity for people to engage with their government and participate in their government. And it's kind of a connection back even to the voting and citizenship question. There's nothing worse, I think, than being part of a community that you're in some way disenfranchised from. And I'm really sensitive to the idea, on one hand, you want to respect voting laws and citizenship, but you want people to have a path forward and the ability to participate in their government. And the neighborhood councils are a fantastic conduit for that. Which reminds me of one of the very first things I dealt with on council was authoring a resolution with regard to White Pine Sash. And for those of you that know the White Pine Sash area in the north side where I live, I will quickly say that via that resolution, which then kicked off a lot of other activity from other organizations around the community and citizen activism, we were successful in changing a DEQ plan from a plan that didn't recognize residential, the value of really residential development in the north side on a portion of that site, to a plan. I mean, they changed it, and I think a lot of people feel like those plans will never change, but it changed because of really active people, and I was frankly just a conduit to be able to represent those values from my community members. So, and in the last 30 seconds, I just want to return to the theme I mentioned before. Change is hard, and that's, I think, the number one lesson I've taken away from council, and I'm looking forward to an opportunity with another term to continue to get better at listening and representing the values of my constituents, and just really excited for that opportunity.
Ryan?
When I ran for council 4 years ago, I really approached it with interest, I guess, and with a sense of duty of sorts. And I've said this a couple times throughout the summer, but I'm running again really because in the last few years it's cultivated in me a sense of passion for the work. It's so interesting, and it's so much fun, and it's so rewarding. It's really addictive. There's so much, and that's because of all of the good things going on in Missoula, and all of the good people that routinely come to council, and from all walks of life and all varieties of issues. And I really look forward to having the opportunity to continue to work with people, to continue to work with the people that I've established relationships over the last 4 years. I'll go back to a couple of specific things that came up on the development piece when we talked about infill development versus other types of development. I think that our planning documents, our growth policy, and all of our planning documents lead me to a single conclusion, which is that growth needs to be deliberate. It needs to be planned, it needs to be deliberate, and it's not that there's a single style of growth. There's a lot of multifamily apartment buildings being built right now, and that's an important part of our housing mix. I think people get nervous that that's sort of what the city's growth policy pushes, is exclusively high-density multifamily, and it absolutely isn't. It's a mix, and it needs to be a deliberate mix, and there needs to be connectivity, and it needs to be accessible to a wide range of income types and a wide range of ages and abilities and modes of transportation. And it just needs to be deliberate and well planned. I had a few other things that I wanted to come back to, but again, it's been a real pleasure serving for the last number of years, and I would be honored to have the opportunity to do it again. We've made a lot of positive changes to our community together, and it's really humbling and inspiring and rewarding.
And Ruth Ann?
One of the things that I think is important for me to remember about this place of Missoula where we live, is that this was the traditional homelands of the Salish and Kalispel people. And so when we make decisions, and when I'm part of being able to bring forward those thoughts and those perspectives, that's something that is important. I think that sometimes has been lacking and is easy to forget. And so I just want to make sure and acknowledge the history of where we are right now. And let's see, what else? Oh, I know. So I've been here for 10 years, but my service on city council has really given me a very different perspective of Missoula, and it's really given me a greater appreciation. When I first moved here, it was from someplace pretty rural, and Missoula is pretty eclectic. And that was kind of how I viewed it, but after serving and thinking about potholes, and thinking about urban deer, and how we're going to approach these different things, and hearing community engagement, I think that has, in some ways, given me a deeper appreciation, and I guess I'd even say maybe love for Missoula. And I really appreciate that, and I believe that what we do on council is service. And that's something that is important to me, that it's not for a great big salary or something, to inflate yourself, but it's service, and that's important to me. So I'm thankful for the opportunity that I've had to serve, and I look forward to the opportunity to continue to serve.
Thank you. Very thoughtful comments. The city's upcoming nonpartisan election will be conducted by mail-in ballot. Ballots will be mailed to qualified voters 20 days prior to Election Day. Ballots must be returned to the Missoula County Elections Office by Election Day, 8 p.m., that's November 7th. More information about all things related to the city election is on the Missoula County Elections official website, or by contacting them at 406-258-4751. On behalf of the Missoula League of Women Voters and the neighborhood councils, thank you all for coming. Thank you all for your excellent responses. And remember, your vote counts. So thank you and good night.